No one stands for the national anthem nowadays unless it's a particular occasion, such as the last night at the Palladium, Sunday night at the Palladium, which is all variety show, or certain other occasions when the Queen is present. When my father was a young man, they did still stand for the Queen when the national anthem started. Now, Her Majesty was born today, 94 years ago, in 1926, for those, for some reason I require you to know the math, maths even, sorry, at number 17 Bruton Street in Mayfair. Bruton Street is still with us, but sadly the Queen's house isn't, which would make that bit of the tour bus rather more interesting than it is to some of us anyway. Her Majesty's home was actually, of course, her mother's home, Elizabeth Bowes Line, or Lady Elizabeth. Now, when the Queen was born there, her father was still, of course, Duke of York, Prince Albert. And Albert and Elizabeth, and as I say, her mother, were really a match made in heaven. Yeah, in theory, they weren't meant to be. They came from sort of slightly different aspects. I mean, she was a lady of high society, but it was considered when he was showing interest in her that she should go with someone else, not him. And indeed, I think personally that the Queen Mother, as I knew her until she died, of course, and well, she still is the Queen Mother, it really did great things to help our future king, especially during the abdication crisis. Now, this isn't about dear old George or Elizabeth, but they are very much instrumental in the lady we now call Elizabeth II. Now, anyone familiar with the royal family of the 1930s would know it went through a fantastically rocky moment, probably until this Prince Harry business, the biggest crisis, if not a bigger crisis, because it involved a king leaving the throne before he died, and very nearly saw the end of monarchy. Now, I mention that because, Prince Albert was, of course, second in line after his brother when their father, George V, was still on the throne. And so David, as Bertie Edward was known, and indeed he had 8 first names, was of course heir to the throne, so he was Prince of Wales. And so, their father dies in 1935, and 1936 even, and George Edward has a seething fit. He breaks down in tears, like you see in the King's Speech, and he becomes our king. But already the cracks were shown, because for a little while before George V died, Edward was shacked up with one of the many women that he had in his life, and that is, of course, Wallis Simpson. Now, Simpson was not liked by some people. Her enemies, and people think Meghan is getting it rough. She is getting it rough, but in the tabloids at least, Wallis Simpson was subjected to all manner of rumours, including that she was actually a man. And I laugh because it was this is the way the world was, I suppose, back then, that they thought they could get away with it, these people. At the same time, the press were sort of sworn to secrecy, or at least don't report everything about the relationship. Well, Edward becomes king. He still wants to marry this woman. You can't. She's a divorcee. And she's American as well. You mad? And long story short, he ends up abdicating the throne, and Bertie is thrust onto the throne. Now, if Edward was shattered when he was told he was going to become king, Bertie was as well. The day it was going on, even though he was, of course, party to what was going to happen, this was not necessarily thrust on him, and someone didn't just walk into a room and go, "Your Majesty," and him going, "What the? No, I'm not." But he was nervous as hell. His stammer and his stutter was still a thing, even with the help of Zoom. Even though he was, of course, getting the help with Lionel Logue, who he gave a medal after the war for services rendered, and they were friends until the king died. So George VI comes to the throne, which means that now his daughter Lilibet is heir to the throne, and when she was born, this was not in the cards. If, say, and what ifs are what they are, if, say, Edward lived a full life and he, stayed on the throne and lived the life he did, which I think he died now 1974, 76, Bertie would never have become king, and might have lived a little bit longer, and Her Majesty would have taken to the throne in her 50s, and still be on the throne, say, my maths is appalling, like 40 years later, and it'd still be a long time for a monarch, but things would have been vastly different. And if Edward somehow had heirs to the throne, then the Queen would not have been on the throne at all. So, and the thing is, Wallis Simpson apparently was actually infertile, or Edward is impotent. There's various stories, but either way, one of them can have children. So, and this is assuming if he stayed on the throne, he stayed married. So, as I say, it's not, but they're all relevant to the Queen's story. From the off, when she was about 2 years of age, the Queen was seemed to know her destiny, and they were getting ready for her to be Queen one day, and they didn't think it'd be as soon as it were. But that is the way the royal family is. I'm willing to bet that though he's a wee snapper of 6, 7 now, Prince George is quietly now being tutored in the ways of how you act, what you do, and he should in theory know that he's going to be our king one day. And because it seemed like the Queen apparently knew she was going to be, could be Queen one day. So, being a young child, she got a little bit above herself, waving at people in a wall fashion when she was out with her mother or whatnot. But that's how it works, whether we people like it or not. I mean, you look at William now, if God forbid the Queen and Prince Charles died today, he would take to it like a duck to water, you would imagine, and Charles certainly would, because he's almost 80. So, the monarchy somehow survived 1936. Parliament in 1936 voted on a discussion, and the question basically was, do you think we should become a republic? And it was defeated by 432 votes to 6. Yes. So that's the last time this country faced it. Now, George's health was alright, but the war worsened it. If you look at a photo of him in 1939 compared to a photo of him in 1945 when the war ended, it looks like the man has aged 20 odd years, and yet when he died he was 56. It was lung cancer, but the Queen Mother went to her grave blaming Edward, because the abdication crisis took a toll on George in more ways than one. So the Queen becomes Queen while she's sleeping in some kind of tent / thing in Kenya. She's on holiday with the Prince Philip, who's in the Navy. He's expecting to take command of a ship in the next couple of years. He's got, as far as he's concerned, he's got a life in the Royal Navy still. They love each other dearly, say what you will about Prince Philip. They are the longest ever married royal couple in British history now, so it'll be 73 years this year in November. So she comes back home to London Airport, as it was in those days more or less, and the Prime Minister and a few others are waiting for her. And her first Prime Minister was Sir Winston Spencer Lewis Churchill, who had been Prime Minister now just about a year for a second. I find it one of the most incredible images of our history anyway, because Churchill was verging on almost 80 years of age. He was born 26 years before Queen Victoria died. So he was a young adult, you might say, when Queen Victoria died. And here he is now, heartbroken that his best friend has died, the king. And he's greeting a young lady who's almost 26, who is a beautiful young lady, who with young children, I believe at that time she had at least Prince Charles, of course, and Princess Anne. And she's now Queen of what's left of the British Empire, already branded the Commonwealth, and Prince Philip had a hard time adjusting to it as much as she did. He found it very hard to get on with it, because until then he was not really in a suffocating world that the royal family can be for any monarch. He considered himself an amoeba. I believe he had a fairly wicked sense of humour at the best of times, but he hated it. And it's one reason why, incredibly, he was the one member of the royal family that was reaching out to Princess Diana when, she and Charles were getting divorced, saying, I know what it's like to be an outsider. But the Queen, God bless her, started to take to it rather well. The year of her coronation, Hilary and Nick climbed Everest, and the Daily Mail, I believe it was, said this is the start of a new Elizabethan era. Well, it was the end of an era in War Racing 1. The empire shattered over the next 10 or so years, depending on what you consider the end of empire, and it didn't end in a nice way, sort of typical of the empire, I suppose. The country was going backwards economically, and many other ways in a way. Things were changing. People were starting to fidget against the establishment. So the Queen has now spanned, as of January, 68 years on the throne. She's the longest serving monarch in our country's history, and she's now the 4th longest European monarch in history. I believe it was Louis... Oh God, what were those notes saying? Louis the 13th or the 12th was 74, 75 years on the throne. Essentially, if the Queen lives to 101 like the Queen Mother did, that's it. She's the longest ever monarch in history. At the moment, it looks like she's going to live a full life. She has lived a full life. And again, no, it's not really related. This is meant to be the story of the Queen. Prince Charles will be king, despite the people who don't want him to be. And I hope he will be king one day. I'm not wanting the Queen to die anytime soon, but I think he'll do all right. He knows what to do now. The public have more or less taken to Camilla. You still get your angry emojis on the Royal Family Facebook page. There's a sentence the Queen wouldn't have heard in 1952. And the Royal Family now is secure. And that's all down to the Queen. Her father made the modern monarchy. Her father came up with the phrase that the Royal Family is the firm. And hence what was said about Kate when she married William. Now she's entered the firm. And again, she's taken to it rather well. I think when the time comes, she'll be a wonderful queen. However, our Queen, Elizabeth, has spanned an incredible age. Even in the past few years alone, technology has come on many years. I mean, put it this way, I'm still amazed, because I'm amazed easily, about what you can do with your TV and that. And I think it was like 97, whenever Katie Hill was presenting Blue Peter, my childhood crush, she did this thing where it looked like a tape cassette, sort of a tape cassette cutaway, and there were 2 tape reels, and she said, look, it's recording TV, but soon you'll be able to start watching your recording whilst it's still recording, kind of. And I was like, wow, because, we had VHS, and you essentially had to wait for something you had to finish your program to record before you could start watching it. You couldn't just rewind the tape and hope for the best. Now, with your DVRs and whatever, you're watching your iPlayer and ITV Hub, because there are other platforms available, you can start watching your program before it's finished. You can now look on Google Maps at a street thousands and thousands of miles away without you having to, which has been infallible when I've been writing some of my stories. You can do everything, it seems. I'm talking to you on a mobile phone, and we'll soon be doing it on YouTube. If this doesn't break down anytime soon. But she's seen that the political landscape has changed and not changed, and many have come and gone. She sadly lost Princess Margaret before her time, and she's weathered storms. Princess Diana, Camilla, Harry. So she's the glue that's kept this monarchy together, and in a way kept the country together. You will, of course, I'm sure, when the Queen dies, whenever that is, many years into the future, hopefully, get that small minority fringe of Republicans who will say, we're going to have a coronation, I mean, this is how it works. And they'll be saying this is a public waste of money and all this stuff. Well, maybe it is, but when was our last coronation? 1953. And, in the 20th century, they had 3 coronations, because Edward didn't have one. And it's a momentous event. In a career way, it's a commemoration celebration. We will queue to see the Queen's body lying in the State of Westminster, which is a tradition now that's gone on, I think, since at least maybe Edward VII. I've got to check, because I've read so much about the monarchy lately. It's all merged into one. It might have been for George VI, actually, but George's body lay in state at Westminster, the Houses of Parliament, and people spent 2 days queuing up to see. Now, in the 20th century, like, my granddad would have seen 2 coronations, and these fantastically long-lived people that are celebrating 115 or whatever years will have seen 4 coronations. It's incredible. So I don't want to sound awkward, but essentially that was the way of life. We got used to a monarch, possibly we got used to a monarch lasting, say, 15, 25 years if they were lucky on the throne, and then we got our next monarch, and the same thing. Now the Queen has lasted 70 years. We're in a situation in a way similar, but not entirely similar, to when Edward VII took to the throne, Victoria's oldest child. They said that when he was due his coronation in 1902, that they had forgotten how to do a coronation. They forgot where people were meant to stand, what the songs were meant to be done. They seriously forgot a lot of what happened, and a lot of what we do for coronations since, like the Royal Navy marching behind the coffin and this and that, started with Edward VII's coronation. And people had known Queen Victoria for something like 63 years. And there's a suggestion, like in the book I read about Prince Charles that my friend got me, that one reason why people don't quite like the idea of Charles as king is change. I've known the Queen all my life. My mother would have known the Queen all her life. A lot of us here in this country would only have known the Queen. So, essentially, there'll be a lot of problems, and people will say, I'm willing to bet there'll be a massive debate about why should the monarchy continue. And yet this has happened, changes of monarchy, since time immemorial. It's a way of life, whether people like it or not. I am a royalist. I'm not one of these idiots that will wear flags and stand outside hospitals where more babies are due, but I nonetheless support the monarchy. Some people ask me why, but I don't know. Part of me thinks it's just because I'm British and that's what you do. And I don't do what I'm told always. But it's all down to the Queen. And when the time comes, this nation will have a level of mourning, possibly, that is not seen since either Lady Diana's death or even the King's death in 1952. And people think I'm morbid, but I'm going to go up to London or drop whatever I'm doing, because the next coronation might not be for a while. You don't know what will happen to Prince Charles by the time the Queen dies. He is, of course, a chap in his 70s. So, the Queen, as I say, is the glue that holds this country together, and hopefully she'll reach her 100th birthday, which means she'll send a card to herself and join the debate. Will she send a card to Prince Philip? I'm personally of the opinion he's going to get 2 birthday cards from her. One will be the very personal card, Dear Philip, I love you very much, now you're 100, blah blah blah. And then he'll get the official automatically sent card from the Queen. So I don't know. I know that a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, this lady reached, I think it was 105, 106, and she made my local news because I think she lives somewhere like Bournemouth or Southampton, and was complaining that for the past 5 or whatever years she had been getting the exact same card from the Queen, and they showed him on the mantelpiece, and it was the same photo of the Queen in I believe it was a yellow dress. And next thing you know, because viral sensations or what that's an expression the Queen didn't have to worry about in this sense, Prince William turned up with a fresh card. Which means the Queen presumably had to pose for a new photo. There, I'm sitting in this room by myself. As Don Rickles said, I'm laughing my arse off. Right then, that's Her Majesty. God bless her, God save her, and hopefully you'll enjoy what is now be my longest audio.